Coming up, a Sad Styles production. Get into it!
So, Andrew, special Monday episode of this podcast. I'm excited to get it going.
Yeah, Mikey, before we go, though.
Yeah.
Swear to me we're going to talk about The Last of Us, Season 1, the whole thing, top to bottom, and you're not going to talk about Overwatch or how much you hate Red Dead Redemption 2.
I mean, I swear, I guess.
Okay, I kind of don't believe you, but okay. Welcome to the Retrograde
video game podcast, where this week we can finally talk to our parents about a video game we love.
Oh my God, we can talk about most of society. My name is Andrew Bascom, and with me as always is the bad boy of podcasting, Mr. Bebop himself.
Mike Kelly, Aaronworth.
Mike Kelly, yes, very good. Mikey, I am so excited to be talking about The Last of Us. I feel like us and the rest of the world has been nothing but talking about prestige drama on HBO, and I can't believe that it's based on a video game.
Prestige drama. You love using that word. It's like
I do.
HBO. It used to be it's not TV, it's HBO, and now it's not HBO. It's prestige drama on HBO. They
have cornered out a market of Sunday night television. No matter what it is, they could be like, it's a serial killer clown, and you're like, I guess this will be a very weird retrospective on masculinity in society or something.
John
like that.
Wayne Gacy. That sounds fantastic. Let's get that.
Well, honestly, when Succession's done, what's going on then? Let's go. Come on, get that.
We're all going to be serial killer clowns when Succession's done. I don't know what we have to look forward to after that.
Oh my God, absolutely. Perry Mason's not doing it. Yes, we're here to talk about The Last of Us. Mikey, obviously these are the two intersection of culture that we love the most. We are video game boys. We love The Last of Us video game.
Well, I'm a video game man. You are a video game boy. That's fine. But I am absolutely I'm absolutely a video game man.
I'll make sure when I introduce you in the future, it'll be the bad man of podcasting, which has such worse connotations. Bad boy is like innocent. Bad man, it's like, oh no, I'm a bad man.
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting recording that we got in general. We're recording this bright and early. Day and date, Monday. We never release episodes on Monday. It's always Tuesday for us, but we're going to get this one out a day early because we got to beat the rush, baby.
Yeah, we got to talk about Last of Us while it's still fresh off of a venison pot of stew, something nice and hot there.
Yeah, sure. Venison, Andrew.
Venison.
It's not hanging intruders.
The second she gave that reaction, I think everyone at home went, "Oh, okay, all right, yeah, all right, ew."
Yeah, no, I'm pumped about this. So just so the listener knows kind of the trajectory we're going to take on this episode, we're going to start by talking about the last episode of the season, episode 9, which just aired last night as of recording. Yes. We're going to go kind of in depth on the episode itself, give our impressions. If you want our thoughts of what we expected from the TV show, you can go back, early January, we had an episode where we did sort of a preview of the show. Yep. So we're not going to relitigate that. You can brush yourself up on all of our impressions and expectations there. And then once we're done getting rid of our thoughts, dumping all our thoughts from the
garbage bin of our thoughts.
Then we're going to give some general season impressions, some comparisons with the game and that sort of thing, and then answer some questions. This is going to be spoiler free for season 2. Obviously we played The Last of Us Part 2, so we're not going to get into anything that might spoil potentially what's going to happen in the second season until a specific point in this episode. We'll give everyone fair warning, and then we'll talk about what we might expect from the next season or 2.
I would agree with you. Yeah, as my player one sitting next to me when the end of the episode happened, I just lifted my arms in the air and I go, "You have to play the second game." We can't wait 2 years for this. You have to play it.
When you and I talked about initially how we thought this season would end. By the way, turns out I nailed it. I got it exactly right. Obviously the ending was there for the taking.
The same as the game.
If you haven't played the game and you're listening to this, it is literally the exact same ending of the game.
Yes.
But you talked about a potential introduction of a concept or character that happens in the second season as the ending of this episode. And I was kind of hopeful that would be the case. only because I can't wait another year with this secret inside of me of like how good the next season gets.
Is this what it felt like for Game of Thrones people that had read the books? Like, is this what it felt like when they see, like, this episode's called The Red Wedding, and everyone and they're like, trying not to explode?
I had an element of that, actually. I hadn't read the books as of The Red Wedding, but after The Red Wedding, or after that season, I read the entire series of books that had been released up to that point. So I knew about Jon Snow, and I knew what was coming there. And then, so I felt like I had a secret that I was holding over everyone's head.
And that's why your favorite season was the last one. So, yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So, Mikey, where do we start? Let's talk about this last episode here of The Last of Us. Ooh, interesting. It's the one that everyone knew just going into it. If you'd played the game before, you know that scene, the iconic scene with Joel going down the hallway, and they literally did it. I don't want to jump to the end, but they literally did it, and my eyes just went as wide as saucers. I'm like, oh my God, they're actually doing it the exact same way. So it's been a big thing coming up here. It's called Look for the Light. Obviously the slogan of the Fireflies, that was the episode title. General thoughts before we get into it here.
Yeah, I liked it. Full disclosure, I had heard before this episode aired that it was going to be about an hour and a half long. So I thought that we were going to get a much more, I don't want to say more fleshed out, because I don't think this episode was missing anything, but it was at the point where when Joel is walking down the hallway in the big climax of this, he's going to the surgery room where Ellie is, and he's just wreaking havoc on the Fireflies. I was like, holy shit, we're probably 35 minutes in. I'm like, Andrew's right. We're going to get the intro to the second game here, until I paused, because I'm like, they're wrapping everything up already, and realized there was only like 10 minutes left. And I was like, fuck, that kind of sucks. But not like, it doesn't suck in a way that it ruined the episode for me. I just had different expectations for it. What are your thoughts on this being the shortest episode of the season? Literally the shortest episode of the season.
It's funny. It does, like, this is not a coincidence to say, the episode moves quite a bit. Like, you don't catch a breath. And I think the use of, this is, we gotta talk about the differences between the games and the TV show in a little bit here, but I don't think there's any huge major differences plot-wise. But what they do is they round the edges and they color the story a little bit, like Ellie's mother.
Yes.
Like, that was not a thing in the game, and you kind of, all of a sudden now, and also two things about this. If you don't know, the voice of Ellie is played by a woman named Ashley Johnson. That is the woman that was the woman that plays Ellie's mother, which I sat there and I went, oh, just if you're going to do anything, Ellie's mother, oh my God, the symbolism. Oh my God, so good. That is a way of like coloring the edges here a little bit. And for God's sakes, for a story that's exposition and you're supposed to like, okay, let's take a second here to learn where Ellie comes from.
Sure.
Fuck, they don't give you it's not a breather at all. Not only is a pregnant woman getting attacked by a zombie and then getting stabbed in the head, she gives birth within seconds. Yeah. And then Marlene is killing her seconds later. It's like, holy shit, this is not like a breather at all. I just thought that coloring around the edges to explain a little bit of why Ellie is the way she is, why she might be immune. And it's not even explaining fully about it. It's just a possibility. And it's the same way in the video game. You never really get an explanation, but what you do is you can find these tapes and notes that kind of have the doctors theorizing why Ellie might be the way she is. But in this one, it's a little bit more direct, which I really liked.
I was going to say, the game definitely leaves that a lot more wide open.
Yes,
I thought this was a big swing, to introduce Ellie's mother, because you don't get that introduction in the game at all, as you mentioned. B, to show Ellie's birth, the green jacket that she wears, the passing down of the knife. There was a little bit there that felt almost too handholdy in my mind. Honestly, I could have done without that scene. I don't think it was a detriment, but it felt like a very HBO TV thing, as opposed to something that we had naturally in the video game. It was very like, let's tie this up in a nice little bow. They have a thesis as to why Ellie is immune. And it's that obviously her mom got bit while she was pregnant and then immediately cut. So it was almost like a natural vaccine or something like that. Where
she had like, she's half exposed. Like, yeah, like that's what it was. I think the only thing, I understand why they're doing it. They're doing it so that you, as a viewer, are going like, oh, right, remember Marlene? And you're like, oh yeah, Marlene from the first episode. Like, you know what I mean? Like, oh yeah. So Marlene showing that connection. And I think the only line that I did the same thing with you where I was like, okay, all right, is that they're like, we grew up together. I'm like, okay,
Yes.
you had to say that out loud. Like, like two people, like you and I grew up together. I would never look at you on our deathbed and go like, how long have I known you? And you're like, we grew up together. You know,
How
like,
long have
what
I
a
known
weird
you?
thing to say out loud.
Literally my whole life. Yeah. It's like, okay. All right.
Okay. All right. Weird. But I did. And the other one too is calling her Ellie. I thought when she was going to die alone for a second, she's like, you'll be called Ellie. I'm like, well, how the hell does anyone else know that? No, but she hands her to Marlene and goes, call her Ellie. Okay, fine. I did like it. They also, it is a Marlene scene. Like it is to show Marlene, to show how ruthless she is.
Someone call
like,
it a Marl scene. Some would.
Is it, let me check IMDb. I think that is the Merle scene.
That's the Marl scene, right?
Yeah. It is. Okay, very good.
And for the record, I don't like that name. I'm just saying some are calling it that.
No, you have to respect other people. The creator's intention was to call it the Merle scene, and you're like, I respect that.
It honestly disgusts me. I hate it. I don't like that people are calling it that.
It disgusts me too. Just like the act of pregnancy, disgusting. Just like horrible. Also that whole thing with the zombie was so scary. I loved it, and I want to talk about this later. But how few actual clickers and zombies are in this show is remarkable. And no, I love it too. I love it. But people are going like, "Oh, that zombie show." I'm like, I think we've seen 2 zombies. Like, 100%. Honest to God. So. With that scene, it reminded me of 28 Weeks Later, though, in the opening with Robert Carlyle running through the fields and they're kind of slowly coming after him and stuff like that, or running after him. I thought that was so good, the inevitability of like, I'm going to die, so I'm preparing to die. And the other one is with the mother having the knife to her throat until she sees them come in. She's like, okay, like she was just ready to kill herself the second she felt herself turning, which 100%. I don't think that's how it works, but whatever.
Or she was ready to kill herself if it was another clicker coming in or something like that.
That's interesting.
I wasn't sure which it was, but okay. That it was a scary scene. It was an intense scene. I wasn't sure, like when they started it out, I was like, oh, are we going to get 30 minutes of backstory before because that's typically what they do in this show is they really flesh it out. And I'm okay that they didn't do it. My biggest fear in this episode was when Joel and Ellie are making their way to the hospital.
Yes.
And there's that scene where it's like, what do we go around or do we go through? If they went through, I thought we were going to get the water tunnel scene, like the the tunnel scene from The Last of Us, where it's basically just a stealth mission with a bunch of clickers, like a very video gamey thing. And I'm like, fuck, if this is where you introduce stealth combat to this show, I'm like, don't do it. Thankfully they didn't. Yeah.
No, they didn't. You know, it's so funny because if you never played the video game and you've just watched a TV show, I think you have an interesting perspective. I think people in our lives are like that too. But like, there was a couple of times where I leaned over to my player one too, like with Marlene explaining to Joel, like it's she has cordyceps that we need to explore and find out why she's immune. And Joel has to say like, that's in the brain. And she's like, yeah. And I had to lean over and go like, it would kill Ellie. And she goes, yeah, I get it. I'm like, okay, I just want to make that clear.
But I think that's reasonable because in my mind, I'm also unsure of the translation between like, do you get this? Because it was very fleshed out in the video game. And I'm not sure that they I don't know, is that shorthand there for new viewers? I was always curious about that.
Yeah, so it's just in general though, and I think I'm going to bring it up a couple times in this episode. I respect the TV show a lot because they have a very hard task to accomplish here. In a video game, you have 60 hours to spend with these people. If you really wanted to deep dive and find every little note and audio clue and every little corner that has like a thing, you will run into thousands of Firefly logos. You'll run into you'll hear about Marlene hundreds of times. And in this TV show, they have to bring her up like 2-3 times and she's got to be in 2-3 scenes and you got to have an emotional connection to it. I do appreciate that they have to move so briskly because everything in the video game, by comparison, it hits you over the head because it has to. It's just repeatedly telling you over and over again. And that's why you have these connections to it. I'm not saying that in any way negatively about the video game, but it's just in a TV show that is like 10 hours. It's it's a hard comparison to make. So
have you seen All Quiet on the Western Front, the movie?
Yes.
Have you read the book or no?
I did read the book. I read it in high school, I think.
Okay, nice. So the reason I bring up this comparison is the movie of All Quiet on the Western Front. It's tough to spoil. If you've seen, cover your ears for the next minute or so.
World War One, everybody.
They end with Hitler walking on being born, and it's like, oh shit, what's going on?
Don't worry, guys. I got this.
Oh
my god.
Kaiser Wilhelm just like solemnly salutes and then goes down.
I'm joking, but the Kingsman literally ends like that. The latest Kingsman.
That's what you said. That was fucking wild, dude. Wild.
It's insane.
No, the end of the movie is so ham-fisted with the way it handles the Paul's death, like the death of the main character. Whereas in the book, it was so subtle that I didn't even pick up on it. My girlfriend had to be like, well, you know, my girlfriend, she made a point. She's like, the one thing I learned about this book is Paul is great at war. He is so good at war. I'm like, he's amazing at war. And she's like, well, until the very end. I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, well, because he dies at the end. I was like, what are you talking about? I had to reread the last like 4 pages because it's so, and this is the comparison I'm making is the book trusts that the reader or the participant will pick up on the subtlety of the message that it's sending. And the movie is like, we don't know if they're going to get that. So let's maybe just make it like as big and blatant as possible. Craig Mazin and Neil Druckmann also had trust in the viewer and the participant to understand what the implications were without beating them over the head with it. And I think that was it shows a sophistication in storytelling that is sometimes absent from an adaptation of an original story from one medium.
I think that's I think that's a really good way of putting it. I also, what I do appreciate about the Last of Us TV show, which I think is absent in a lot of modern large scale productions, is they don't trust the viewer. They just don't trust the viewer to get anything. So they need to tell you over and over and over again that like, okay, like I get it. Oh, he's a bad guy. Okay, cool. You know, wait, whatever. You know, kind of like the All Quiet in the Western Front movie. Not a fan. And
I thought it looked great. I just think that the execution was not as strong as it could have been.
The character development too, just like, okay. But you know, and what I do appreciate about Last of Us and what I wanted to make sure with my player one, I was like, she's going to die if they have that surgery. And she's like, okay, yeah, I get it. I'm like, okay, all right. Just want to make sure. And I wonder who at home, like, wouldn't have immediately got that until the end there a little bit. I will say what is really interesting is Joel's bloodbath of Firefly agents or whatever going through the hospital somehow in my mind felt more violent in the TV show than in the video game, even though in the video game you were controlling Joel killing these people.
Yes.
You were more a participant in it, and yet for some reason as being the observer in the TV show, I was like, oh God. Yeah, I don't know why.
Let me propose this as the reason why. Yes. The video game of The Last of Us is incredibly violent all the way throughout. Visceral murders of clickers and human beings alike. Mazin and Druckmann were very reserved in violence up until the last 2 episodes or so, which I think made violence feel much more visceral and much more impactful. When Joel lets loose, you know, he's been reserved this whole time. And the way that it was shot, where it's kind of like the dulled sound and Joel is just on autopilot. The reason why it hit me was because we haven't seen that in him yet. Whereas the scene with the Fireflies in the video game is just one of 20 scenes where you've mowed down 30 people.
No, it's so funny because that's a really good point. I agree with you. It's pretty early on that you're learning the controls. You're trying to learn what do clickers respond to or blah, 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 blah. And a clicker will get you and rip out your throat. And you're like, oh my God, Jesus Christ. And so that's like, whatever, 20 minutes into a video game and you're like, okay, so this is what I got to deal with. Yeah. And you're right. Visceral is a really good word. It is so visceral that you genuinely try not to die because like, I don't want to see Ellie get her throat ripped out again. This would be very dramatic and I don't like it. And so in this, you're right. And I just kind of think the quiet nature of it too. I just, you know, the way they shot it was very different. It was very handheldy and very close to them, which I thought was really cool. And it really is impactful because you do feel the violence of Joel and you feel the weight of the decision that he's making, which is the point.
Yeah, you do feel the weight, and it introduces a side of Joel that I don't know that I fully picked up on in the video game. Whether it was there or not, I don't know, or if this is sort of a new introduction to the TV show. But we talk about Ellie's psychopathy in the video game, which in this season is much more explicitly hinted at, and not even explicitly talked about, especially in episode 8, her potential psychopathy. Joel's psychopathy, though, on display here, showing him without abandon killing innocent people who are 100%. And not reacting is
emotionless completely.
Do you remember that from the first game? I don't remember that from the first. I'm not saying I dislike it, but I think that's kind of a new introduction to his character.
They do talk. I don't remember it tremendously in the video game because, you know, what am I trying to think? Like flashbacks, things like that are not really a part of the first game. All you're doing is really moving forward. I think that's why what Left's Behind, the DLC that is in the first season. I think that's the only time that that happens. But in the TV show, it's very much insinuated that he's like, oh, I did a lot of horrible things.
Sure.
Like I've done horrible things with Tess. Like he was the heavy. He was the guy that they got to do stuff that was horrible and whatever. And it seems like, even with Tommy or Tess or other people that he had worked with in the past, they had shown levels of squeamishness and Joel didn't. And I think they insinuate that too when he is picking up children in the beginning and throwing them in the fire. Like I think there is this insinuation that he's like, no, he's kind of dead inside. And I think that's why the emotions he has for Ellie and all this kind of stuff is like awaking something new in him. And oh my God, I can be a father again.
Yeah.
Which also I will say too, he is so much more paternal in the last 2 episodes than in anything else we've seen. He's showing genuine emotion and care for her.
So what do you think about that though? Because we talk about again differences between the movies and the game, the TV show and the game. Although they all felt like movies, it felt like nine short movies. The game has a lot more time to flesh out Joel's eventual softening to Ellie, whereas episode 8 is like a hard turn with his just overall mushiness towards her. And episode 9, he's an entirely different character. The one thing I think that they maybe got wrong, or maybe had no choice but to do just based on timing, was that character development seemed very, very fast. There was no learning curve. It was like from episode 6 or so when Ellie mentions Sarah's name and he's like, don't, and he turns dark, to her just mentioning Sarah in passing as they're walking to the hospital and him continuing conversation. I know that was done intentionally to show his growth, but it felt a little too quick for me. Did you feel the same?
Kind of, not really. Like, I think it's by nature of the show, you kind of have to do this because there's not going to be a season. Well, hypothetically, there's a season 3 or 4 or something like that, but it's not something that we can show that in time.
Sure.
I think the one that was, so he says when he snaps because he's like, don't mention Sarah's name.
Yeah.
And then later, I think it was an episode later when he's talking about Tommy taking Ellie, which, man, that would have gone way different. Tommy just gets shot by the first firefly. You're like, okay, well, Ellie's dead. He says like, I am not your father. You are not my daughter. Yeah. Like, you are not my daughter. And you hear him say it. And at the time I was like, ooh, wow, that really stuck out. But what he's saying now, I'm looking back, is saying it not to her. He's saying it to him. He's saying like, you're not my daughter. And it's not because I'm making you feel bad. It's because I got to remind myself of that. And I think it's in that moment you see it turn all over, where he's just like, it's already happening in his brain, his heart, all this kind of stuff. He has feelings towards Ellie. He's trying to look after her, and he's trying to remind himself, don't, but it's inevitable and he can't. Yes. And so I think it's such a big flip into going to episode 10 where he's saying like, you and Sarah would have liked each other.
Episode 9. Yeah.
No, 10.
9.
Was it 9?
9. Yeah.
There's only 9 episodes. Sorry, 9 episodes. So when he says that, I was like, he's done now. He's a big softy, and he almost just died. So I think that's also maybe a thing too. Where
maybe that thing where everyone's dad who's had like heart surgery comes out of it, and they're like an entirely changed person. They're like the mushy dad. Yeah, exactly, exactly. So again, I'm not saying it was so distracting that it was unbelievable, but
no.
If we're comparing game to TV show, I liked the slow, drawn out process of him softening up as opposed to like, episode 9 starts and he's like the best dad in the world.
Yeah. Well, but that's the problem. That's kind of why I just, I'll bring it up 6 more times, but it's just like, this is what's great about video games is you get to spend so much time with these characters and get to know and have these stories and all this kind of stuff. And like, which I'm really glad they brought back like the puns and things like that. Cause it's such like a big part of the game is the two of them just being like, just like cranky and like, trying to bug him. And they're going back and forth and stuff like that. And obviously you just can't do that. If you did that for a whole episode of television, it would drive you fucking nuts.
Yes.
But for some reason in a video game, it works.
There's an expert level of choice in terms of when to have flavor to a scene as opposed to get directly to the story. Like they don't lean on the puns too much. They're just like, okay, let's have 2 or 3 of them. We'll show some bubbly conversation and that'll give you an insight into where they're at right now. But apart from that, they're just going to go do their own thing. They don't need to linger on it too much. And that's why, when this episode ended up being 44 minutes, the shortest episode in the season, it's not like I went away from it feeling cheated. Although I did get a call. I got a call from my mom as soon as the episode ended. And she was like, like, what the fuck just happened? You're like, she just says a line and then the episode's over and the season's over. I'm like, Mom, that's exactly how the game ended. And she's like, oh, okay, I guess that's a thing. But yeah.
Oh, God. And even just like, so Joel goes on his rampage, kills at everything. The doctor picks up a scalpel and says, like, I can't let you do it. Without hesitation, just puts one between his eyes. And then the nurses turn around and you're like, and it was in that the nurses turn around, like, turn your backs now. And they do it. You're like, oh, there's Joel. There it is. There's the guy. Like that's the military tactician style level of like, I'm not going to repeat myself. Like, go.
Do you remember in the game, Joel doesn't kill those nurses, right?
No. I think you can kill the nurses. I don't think I did.
So in the game, I remember you can shoot the surgeon in the game, but if you don't shoot the surgeon and you just go to walk past, you stab him in the neck with his own scalpel. And there was that made you feel so fucking gross in the game, but it really worked. And I was hoping to get that in the TV show, but based on everything we saw about Joel, where it's like, he's not the guy in the movie who's like, any last words. He's like, it's done. He's like, you're already dead. I'm just moving this process along. So I don't think he needs to walk up and stab him. He's just, boom, get out of my way. I'm on a mission right now.
When he says, like, he's just like, give me the girl, and they're like, I can't let you do that. And not a second goes by without his words leaving his mouth before he puts a bullet in his head. And you're like, holy shit, like Joel. And just also, again, emotionless, just like, do it. And you're like, oh God. You feel like you're losing the guy. Yeah,
it's so interesting because even though that moment is scripted in the TV show, obviously, but also in the game, you like it puts you. If you haven't played the game, what happens is it puts you face to face with the surgeon, and there's no way around it. You have to go through the surgeon one way or another. So it is scripted. But because my version of Joel sat there for a bit and like looked around for like some other options before eventually completing it, there was an element of remorse that I read into Joel. But now with the TV show, it just happening, it's a different Joel than I had, even though we're playing a scripted game. It's not like I made a choice. It was just my own hesitation played into my reading of the character, which I found to be kind of like a fascinating difference between an interactive medium and then television.
Yeah, and what Mikey's describing too is like a very popular thing that happened with a lot of people in that game. There was some element, it was the appearance of an element of choice, which wasn't actually true. But you had the feeling that you could choose to whether you're going to save Ellie's life or not, when really inevitably you couldn't, and you had to kill them. And so, but for some reason, it made you feel like you're like, well, I'm just going to take her. Everyone just back off. No, doesn't work like that. And I appreciate that like, this game does that constantly while giving you the appearance of choice when really that's not what happens in reality. And so, yeah, you're right. That's what happens in the OR, and he takes Ellie, and very much it kind of plays out from there. The lying to Ellie to make her not feel so bad about the choices he made. And
also the interaction with Marlene.
Oh, yes, right. Which is kind of like a cutscene too, which is an interesting one because there's another one, an appearance of choice, that you feel like you can walk away from Marlene, like, and not kill her, even though you'd have shot her once, but you can like, oh, I'm going to walk away. No, she dies. She dies no matter what. You got to kill her. And it's the same thing in this one where he does almost in flashback show that he's like, no, I have to kill you. I was almost hoping they changed a little element of the Marlene interaction. The stopping him in the parking garage before getting to the car felt very video gamey, like last boss kind of moment. Yeah. It, like too perfect, too much kismet of like right place, right time. I know you can read into it. Marlene's also a tactician. She knows he's going to be going to the garage and she's going to wait for him there. But like, it feels strange. The one car that was half started. Yes, but it feels strange that in Marlene's, like, in order for that to be true, Marlene would have had to know shit was going down on the top floor, not post up near the surgery room and try to take out Joel before it happens, but to assume it's going to happen anyway and then meet him in the parking garage is just a strange string of decisions that would have had to play out by Marlene, who is otherwise a ruthless person, for that to make sense. Well, there was a part of me too that was thinking about afterwards. I'm like, maybe get Marlene just outside the operating room. Like, don't do it. Like this this is the rest of our life. Like she almost had to explain the terms of it again. Like here are what the stakes are. But then that's like the most television-y thing of all time. Like we know the stakes. We don't need to be reminded here. Like it's all good. And ultimately I'm kind of glad they did what they did. And I think it was also one of Bella Ramsey's best acting performances too, in a very
For sure.
At the end, it's like it's all across her face. She knows exactly what happened. And she's not happy being lied to, but she's going to accept it. And you're like, man, this is good. This is deep.
So let's talk about then that moment where Ellie makes Joel tell her that everything's okay. That everything he said about the Fireflies, because, he basically says hey, so it turns out there were a ton of kids like you and there's nothing that they can do about it.
And everyone got ice cream and it was exactly great. Yeah, everyone. Yeah.
In the game, I always read that situation. Her making him tell her that everything he's saying is true. She's basically saying like, I'm going to put my trust in you. Even though she knows he's lying, she needs to hear it so that he can take the burden of responsibility off of her. And I thought that the line in the game was slightly different from the TV show, where she seems almost disappointed in him for lying to him or lying to her. Did you read that at all?
Yeah, I could see what you're saying. I do believe that Ellie kind of knows what happened. Like not probably to the full extent, but I do get even in the TV show that she's like, you're lying to me. Okay. I don't know how to process that.
I think kind of in both the TV show and the game, I think both Ellies know. Yeah. But I think one is happier being lied to, and the other is a little disappointed in Joel. Bella Ramsey being disappointed in Joel, or maybe I just misread it. Maybe it's just a difference in acting. I don't know, but.
No, I think, a subtle difference, but like nonetheless, I think so. We also talked over the giraffe scene too. Like that definitely happened, but,
over the
giraffe scene.
Oh, the giraffe scene.
We get the giraffe scene, which I know, which is so many people's, like if it's not the hallway of the operating room, it's, I also did appreciate that, like, the Fireflies respected the hospital's wishes and go, pediatric operating room is this way. Not like, we're going to do it in the middle of a fucking hallway. Who the fuck cares? Kind of thing. Like, he's like looking at the signs like, this way. Got it. All right,
of course.
Yeah, okay. But is that the giraffe scene, which is like maybe everyone's like lasting image of this game, is that Ellie sees giraffes for the first time that are broken from the zoo or whatever, and she asks Joel what they are. And Joel's like, those are giraffes. You don't know what those are? And she's like, no. And it's this like moment of wonder, and you realize this innocent child and all the shit she's gone through in this horrible world she lives in can have these moments of wonder. Now, they changed it slightly, and I'm kind of glad they did, because what Ellie understands and knows about the world, it seems to be on a very rocky,
100%.
like, I don't understand. She understands a lot about space, but then escalators are like, what the fuck is this?
Yes,
like,
exactly.
Okay, wait a second.
Yeah.
You never saw a movie? Like, we know those exist still. Like,
Yeah, I agree with that. There were, and even like I was constantly wondering what her education level is, her knowledge of the outside world. Like when Joel brings her Boggle, I was like, does she even know enough word? Like what is her education level? Like, I, those sorts of things. Not that I need it and need everything answered, but I agree. Like, so what you're saying, the thing that she fixed, or that they fixed in the TV show, is that she knew what giraffes were, right? Like she didn't in the TV show, she didn't ask what they were.
Yeah, what in the video game, she asks what they are to Joel. They kind of cut that, and they have a nice kind of moment, silent scene of like wonder and stuff like that, which I think is also just impactful too.
Yeah, it was great. Like you cannot. Again, we're kind of talking to the people who haven't played the game. You cannot overstate the impact of this scene in the game, especially because like The Last of Us Part 1 came at a time when game development companies were still figuring out how to make impactful human stories. It wasn't as like, we didn't have as many of these at the time. So for a game to decide to give you a very understated scene with giraffes and say a lot about one of the main characters in Ellie just by the introduction of a giraffe was so sophisticated in the realm of storytelling for video games at the time that it hit us all very, very hard. So we talked about in one of our Patreon episodes over at patreon.com/retrograde podcast, Mushroom Club, $5 a month. We talked about the scene a couple episodes ago where you see monkeys and we're like, oh my God, we're going to get the giraffes. The giraffe scene's going to happen. And we were excited about it, but
Well, and also, like, I'm glad they didn't do what is a giraffe, because like 2 episodes before, she should have been going like, what are those? What the hell is this? Are they jumping out of a window? Like, are these more zombies? Are we going to turn into those? And then Joel has to go like, actually, we turned from them. And she's like, what the hell is going on? Evolution, what is that?
That's so funny. Oh my god.
Has anyone introduced the idea of God to you? Oh yeah, because the cult a couple episodes ago. But yes.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, so like, and that's where it ends, with the okay, and ends in this really, it's so funny. There are episodes where people go like, oh, it's a cliffhanger. And you're like, it's not a cliffhanger if you're reading at all into the story. It's not a cliffhanger. You know exactly where they are when that season ends, where the two of them are. Joel is hopeful and desperate to save Ellie, and Ellie is weirdly getting put off by this relationship she has, and she's she has more mixed emotions, I'd say.
They hinted so many times in this season that maybe what we should do is not pursue the vaccine option and just go live our lives. And Ellie says like, but then what's the point? And Joel's like, that is the point, is just survival, like endure and survive. That's what you do, which is funny because the irony is when in the episode with Sam and Henry, when they're talking about endure and survive, Joel's like, that doesn't sound like enough, does it? But that is all he wants. All he wants to do is endure and survive. So
it's like tomorrow.
Yes, exactly. But they set up the fact that like, maybe that is all there is just enduring and surviving. Maybe that's all we have. So when the season ends with them deciding to do that, it shouldn't, there is no clip. There are no more unanswered questions. The question of season 1 was, do we pursue this for the greater good, or do we pursue a life for ourselves in spite of not helping other people? The answer is we're going to go live our own life. That's the answer. There are no more lingering questions. This is not a cliffhanger. This is not Tony Soprano in the diner. It's a different thing.
Exactly. No, for sure. It's like I was talking about with the video game. Excuse me, I was like Porky Pig there for a second. Is the illusion of choice? This is the exact same one again. Ellie feels like she had a choice in this matter. It was an illusion, though. She didn't get to decide. Yeah, and I think that's what the interesting part about that future conflict will be between the two of them. We're not saying anything, but obviously they're going to have to talk about it.
Yeah. It does. Yeah. It does speak to a lot of what will inform their relationship in the next season. Yeah, we're not saying too much. I think to say that just that the second season deals with a bit of a time jump. They move forward a little bit in time. So Ellie's a little bit older, Joel's a little bit older, and then you have to kind of infer what could have happened in the span of that time when their relationship is growing, but also is growing, but also there's a seed of mistrust and doubt there. So there's like Princess and the Pea kind of thing. Overall, Andrew,
that's interesting.
This episode, as a finale, as a send off to what you and I think both agree is one of the greater shows we've seen in the past couple of years. What did you think of this as a way to cap it off? In general, did you like it? Did you not? Your thoughts?
I really loved it. I was so afraid they were going to take this like very I don't know. This whole show really hinges on this scene and the decisions that are made in this episode. And I am so glad that they gave us like a bang bang kind of episode. I think it really was, and it's a bold decision. Why not make it an hour and 20 minutes and have every fucking conversation and play with every emotional, because there's so many characters that, Marlene dies, you know what I mean? Like you're never going to see her again. So like, why don't we just every drop of juice out of this lemon here a little bit? Now they went for it, and I'm really glad that they did, because it was true to the show that they are trying to portray so far. So in itself is a great bookend to chapter 1 of The Last of Us. I just think it was a great decision. What about you?
No, I agree. I at first, like I said, I was weirded out by the fact that it was the shortest episode, but it wasn't short in a lazy way. It was just distilled to its purest essence. There was no fat on this episode, and it moved very quickly as a result. Yes. And I think it felt like what Joel probably felt like when he knew the decision he had to make. It's like, the decision's been made. I'm getting to the end of I'm killing everyone in here, and I'm taking Ellie out. There is no stopping it. And he probably blinks and it's over. Just like we started this episode, we blink and it's over. And we've got all the context of this first season now. I felt kind of like 100%. Him in that regard. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. It was a great last episode, and we could do. You want to talk about the season as a whole a little bit, just because, like, the only other thing I wanted to say was Marlene giving Joel so much credit. Like, you traveled across the country with this girl, like that's amazing. Yeah. It's so good. And then she's like, "All right, 2 guys, take him out." And Marlene, you have to know that's not going to work.
She also says, she's like, "You're the one person in this world I'd never want to be in debt to." She's afraid of him, and she doesn't just put a bullet in his head right there. Like,
just like Ellie's mother. Why did you not even hesitate? Just shoot him. He's barely awake.
He's going to take down this whole hospital. This one's on you, Marlene. I'm sorry.
Just two nameless stooges. Go take them out to don't take to an isolated staircase where definitely no one will hear you. That's a good idea. It's like a fucking Dr. Evil plot.
One of those stooges was the biggest asshole in the world. I was so happy when he died. Yeah.
They have to still do that thing where he was a bad person. Good. I feel good that he died. That's good.
So what I liked though is that from that moment on, from that stooge getting killed, everyone else seemed relatively innocent. You have one guy putting down his gun and surrendering and getting shot in the head. So
I know
it got rid of that cliche of everyone's bad here. So you gotta, it again just speaks to the psychopathy of Joel, which is going to be that would be the name of my essay about The Last of Us season 1.
The thesis. Yeah.
Joel.
We talked about the show when it was coming out. We obviously, you and I had this kind of circled and said man, The Last of Us is making a TV show on HBO. HBO shows, we love HBO shows. This is great. Last of Us, really good prime storytelling, version. Obviously, I think I'd been a lot more negative about adaptations about video games into TV and movie properties. I don't know. I don't know about that. I've hated adaptations for the most part. But you liked Sonic and you liked Detective Pikachu.
Yeah, that's true.
You liked, the more recent ones have been,
I think they've gotten
more
better,
favorable. More favorable for you. And so I was okay, this kind of gives you hope. Hope also scares you. It's kind of like this fucking show too. Hope kind of scares you a little bit too, because then you're I have expectations now and whatever. And I'd love to hear how do you think this handled this versus the expectations you had going into it?
Yeah. I think, when we first talked about this back after episode 1, we released a similar episode to this one. And when it was first announced, I was not excited for this. The reason why I've liked some of the video game to movie adaptations is because they went the silly route. They didn't try to go the Mario Brothers route of darkening up a silly story. They played with the whimsy of video games. Now, The Last of Us, in my mind, was already kind of perfect as a story. And I'm what more can the TV show do that the video game didn't? Now, when I saw episode 1 and I saw that they were able to kind of diverge the storylines from Joel and tell a little bit of the surrounding context of his life through storytelling of other characters, prime example being the Bill and Frank episode, I started to feel a lot more promise, and I felt there was a lot more potential in the story. And I think ultimately it worked. I think ultimately the TV show did something different enough from what the game did. It cut out all, I've always said about The Last of Us, my least favorite part about The Last of Us was playing The Last of Us. I thought the gameplay of the first one in particular was very frustrating and not very fun. But the story was great. This kind of cut out all those scenes of the water tunnel or the clickers or too much of that, and just focused on what made The Last of Us great. Again, build a wall. The clickers are going to pay for it. And I thought
they need a clicker and a MAGA hat, and you're just oh, this asshole. It's good. I'm going to kill this guy. That's good. I feel good now. Yeah.
And then I think they landed the ship really well. I really don't have too many complaints about this show, and I think it exceeded my expectations beyond what I would have expected for sure. What about you?
Yeah, I think it's hard not to say it's unequivocally just a success. If we not only, I say we as a video game community, and really as the mayor of the video game community, is that if we are not looking at stuff like The Last of Us going on a huge network, not like QB or something like that, something ridiculous where you're where's that on the channel? Something big like HBO giving the Sunday night program with a big budget and it looks good and whatever, and you are calling your mother afterwards who just watched the show day on date, live to watch it. I think this is unequivocally a success. It has become a pop culture sensation. Everyone loves Pedro Pascal. It is worked to the best of ability. Now, can you nitpick here and there? Yeah, sure, probably. But just as a whole, forest for the trees here. This is a success, and there's kind of no way around it. I'm just, and to be honest, like we're saying, hope is a dangerous thing. I am relieved. I am so relieved that they used a property that we really love, and it tells a great story. And you walk away going yeah, they kind of did it. That's awesome.
See, I'm more than relieved, because I would have been relieved if I had low expectations and it didn't suck. I had low expectations and it was really good. I'm excited about what this could potentially mean for future shows, movies, adaptations, whatever. I've also I've been very vocal in the sense that I don't think a movie can do something that a video game can't already do. So the adaptation of movie to video game, and that's a whole argument that I've gotten into in the past. You can find it in our backlogs if you need.
Yeah.
But it gives me promise that there could be proper adaptations, like good versions of this. And it also, the relief that I do feel is, okay, Neil Druckmann was given an opportunity to speak on behalf of all creatives in the realm of video games, and he's able to adapt his story for the medium that I think is judged on more of a universal level for storytelling, which is television.
Sure.
And he can hang with the big boys. And I like knowing that we're not just looking at video games and taking like worse versions of something that we appreciate about other mediums and being like, this is good too. It's like, no, it's just as good when you have a storyteller in video games make the jump to TV and movies.
Well, it's kind of like, I feel like we're in a moment like Michael Keaton's Batman comes out and they're like, oh, and they start going like, what else you got in this comics thing? And they're like, The Shadow or Phantom or whatever. And you're like, oh, cool. And you're like, it doesn't always work. I bet you very begrudgingly, there are producers out there, they're like, okay, what else you got in video games?
Yeah.
And they're like, well, you're like, yeah.
There are going to be some stinkers. There are going to be some stinkers for sure.
There will, continue to be some stinkers that, and not, of course, Super Mario Bros. That comes out April, whatever, 4th or something like that. That one is going to be the most vanilla piece of trash of all time. That is my prediction, by the way. I think it's going to be a totally safe, fine movie. It's kind of like the Lego movie where you go like, hey, the Lego movie is great, right? And you're like, yeah. And you're like, oh, I don't remember a single part of it. Wait, why is that? And you're like, everything is just like nitpicked to death. I think that'll be that. But it is going to open the floodgates though. They are going to go like, okay, so like this Hollow Knight. You're like, what is this all about? Is this a thing? Like,
my prediction is BioShock gets an HBO level production and it isn't good. There's something about, I think it's almost unfilmable. And I think they're going to throw a lot of money behind it because it has sort of that same love and appreciation that gamers put behind The Last of Us, that same groundswell. And I just think that's a little bit less filmable than The Last of Us is. So we'll see how that goes.
Well, and always the rumor's always been the BioShock has Netflix has the rights now or something like that, or some creative is taking it to Netflix, which would be the worst possible outcome because Netflix does in the best way, in a great creative way. The Netflix doesn't give notes, but at the same time, that is what worries you about this kind of stuff because HBO is great because they let them do stuff, but they will pop in and go like, have you thought about this? And they're like, oh, that's cool. Okay, whatever.
Jay Leno showing up as a producer.
Yeah. Hey, have you heard about this? Boom. And so. So you want them to do what they want to do, but like Netflix doesn't have a great track. Like it's not a great hit record. How about that? Like, the percentage is pretty low, so that scares me a little bit.
So let's we talked about maybe doing something kind of exciting here and ranking the episodes.
Oh, ranking.
Do you want to rank the episodes from your least favorite to your favorite?
Mikey, I'd love to.
We can kind of go maybe one by one here if that makes sense.
Okay.
And I've also got and then with each one, I have a designation of whether I thought the game's treatment or the TV show's treatment were better for that subject matter.
Oh, interesting. Okay. I'd love to hear about that.
Okay. So let's start. I'm going to go, I'll start us off with my 10th favorite episode, my least favorite episode.
Ninth favorite.
Ninth. Yes.
You just did the mistake I did earlier. That's the only reason I know.
I did. Well, I'm looking at my spreadsheet, but I have a header, so I saw 10, but that's really 9. Yeah. My least favorite episode, not to say it was bad, but I think it came in juxtaposition to a great episode, is episode number 4, Please Hold My Hand. IMDb rating was an 8.4. And I thought in terms of game or show, it was a draw because it was too different from, it wasn't really in the video game, that one. So that was my least favorite.
Okay. I'm starting to worry that we might have the exact same list because mine was also 4.
Okay.
You're exactly right. It does what it needs to do here. It is coming off the Bill and Frank episode, which is an emotional capsule episode. Like it's just very small. And you need to go like, hey, heads up. It's a big world. There's zombies. Oh my God. Let's get back into the story. Okay, for sure. We definitely need that. And it's like a cold bucket of water over your head a little bit. But I agree with you. It's also not the one that you'd go back and like, oh, I have so many memories of episode 4.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, this one I don't know why I put it so low, but it's for my number 9. I'm going to put what's that? Oh, sorry, my number 8. Oh boy,
Jesus Christ!
My number 8 is going to be Left Behind.
Yeah, shit. Okay, so that's mine too. And you know what?
Really?
And
Okay, wow.
Yeah, it's a really good episode, but they're all really good episodes. So you kind of have to, something has to come in eighth. Like and another one where it's like, you need this story. You need to reset a little bit. You need to slow the brakes and go like, okay, why are we here? What are we doing? You know, like and it's no fault of anyone there. It's a really beautiful episode to look at. The neon is really cool. I think what's her name? The woman who played Riley was great. And I was like, yeah, this is great. It is not, I just want to make clear, not a bad episode. Just there's a bunch of other stuff that happens in this season that are more memorable in my mind.
Yeah, I think in terms of game or movie or game or show, I think the game handles that a little bit better. Left Behind was one of one of the best DLC packages you could possibly get. The story of Ellie and Riley came out in video game world after all of us had played The Last of Us. So you go back and get that coloring of their relationship. That was episode 7, a 7.4 on IMDb. My number 7 is Endure and Survive, episode 5. Okay. I think a lot of people probably like this one a little bit more than I did.
Sure.
I just didn't love the fact this is the episode with Sam and Henry and that big, I can never remember which one, Sam or Henry getting bit, and then the younger brother getting bit and infected, and the older brother having to kill him afterwards. The reason why I didn't like this one is it had the biggest set piece with infected. It didn't answer the question as to why, if Joel said infected can only live 3 months, are there a ton of infected living under Kansas? And then also, everyone in this set piece dies except for the only 4 characters that we care about. I didn't love the handling of that. Maybe they could have changed it. Maybe they couldn't. Maybe it was just part of the storytelling, but that's my number 7.
All right. My number 7, this is where we're going to diverge finally, is going to be episode number 2, Infected. Now, it's a great episode. This is Tess' death scene. This is, whatever. And it opened up a lot of the world. Now, I will say the only reason it was like, this is coming where it is for me is that this is also maybe the episode that has taken the biggest divergences from the game, where like the mouth tentacles and the piles of zombies and kind of thing. And I also think the CG is a little shoddy in this one too. But so I just, while it's really good and Tess is an incredible character and stuff like that, it was just kind of like one of those ones where the story was still a little slow, so I kind of liked it a little bit later.
Yeah, I hear you. So Endurance 5 was a 9.5 on IMDb. Infected was a 9.1, and that is my number 6. So we're right around there. And for the same reasons, I thought it was a very infected heavy episode, which I didn't love. And it was also, it introduced the idea of like the fungal network, which didn't really come into play all that much in the show. I thought they were going to do more with it. Maybe they will in later seasons, but it just felt like there was a little bit too much in the realm of it being superfluous and a little bit set piecey that I didn't love as much.
I like to think of it like the fungal network is like operators from the 30s, and they're like one second, and they have to switch a couple of lines and stuff like that, and then there's a pile of zombies like, oh, okay, good. Okay, so that's your number 6.
That is my number. That's my number. Our 5.
Numbers are terrible.
That's my number 5.
That's your number 5.
So what's your number 5?
Thank you very much. Now, what is my number 5? Okay, very good. Okay, very good.
Very good.
I just want to make sure we're on the same numbers here. Numbers are not our strength right now.
No. It's too early in the morning.
Number 5 is going to be Endure and Survive for me, so we kind of flipped our answers here a little bit. I agree with you the same way. If you didn't have the big pile of zombies coming out of the thing, which it's so funny we're talking about a zombie show, hypothetically, and we're like, the zombies though, too many zombies. It just, like, good job show that everything else about it is more interesting. I think the Sam and Henry stuff is the most interesting part, and I think it's kind of mired in this, like, zombie gymnast kid that tries to kill Ellie and like some other odd stuff.
Megan,
you're
the
like,
infected Megan zombie.
Megan, the infected zombie. Yeah, she's a robot, but she's a zombie. And but the Sam and Henry stuff is so good at the end, especially when he is a zombie and she tries to save him. And oh my god, the shooting himself and everything off of Ellie's face is so good.
Yes, and infected was my number 6. I think that we would.
What in the hell, Mikey? You're staring at a spreadsheet. You got to help me out here.
I can't. There are too many numbers. Wait, 2, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, there's way too many numbers here. Because I have the episode number, I have the number of my table, and then just the number up the list. But that's yours. And
Megan has a 3 in it. What are we doing?
What are we even talking about
numbers?
Here, guys?
Come on.
So Infected was my number 6. My number 5 is actually going to be Kin. Which is the introduction of oh god, what's the name of that town from season 2? I don't remember.
Oh,
Jackson. Yeah. Jackson, Wyoming. Yeah. Good episode altogether. Like, again, not a bad episode. I love the introduction of like a city that is kind of working. You get the integration between Tommy and Joel. 8.9 on IMDb, and I gave that a draw from the TV show and the game because they're kind of too different in terms of beats for storytelling.
Well, that's where kin is for me too. It's the exact same number for me. So, and I feel the exact same way. You know, like this is also one of the biggest divergences from the game is that the introduction of Jackson, Wyoming, this early into the game. Which, by the way, I just also want to say, going into the finale, thank God they did that. What a really smart choice to use Jackson now because now they're driving back to Jackson and you're like, oh yeah, right. We get to go to this thing. If in the game, if I remember this correctly, they're going to a new town, which is the weirdest thing in the world. Cause like Ellie's already like, she's in like a surgical gown and we're like, let's go to a new town. You're like, what the hell? Really? Like that would be just too much new on new.
Yes.
And now we at least feel like in one place in the world, there is a safe haven for them. So what a really smart decision for them to do that.
That's great. By the way, in that last scene, was Ellie in a hospital gown or did she have her clothes on?
No, she had changed at that point. But I was just saying, like in the car, and like Joel is probably like leaning back, going like, "Where do you want to go?
How did she change?
What do we do?
How did she change?
I have no idea.
It's a good question.
TV magic.
So yeah, Ken had an 8.9 on IMDb. My number 4 is When We Are in Need, episode 8. A 9.4 rating. Obviously the episode where Ellie really digs her claws into people's faces, necks, jugulars, starts to destroy, showing that she is capable of surviving on her own. Overall, a solid episode, but I think it was marred slightly, like Bill, by the fact that I think the game handled that area a lot better.
I was actually going to say I thought this episode was going to be we have the same list so far. Because I thought this episode was going to be handled. This episode, was going to be lower in this list, whatever number that would be, 13, 18, I have no idea what numbers are anymore. And because I agree with you, everyone really loved that episode. They're like, oh my God. I was like, yeah. I think the video game handled it better. And it's not to take anything away from the TV show. It's just you have something that you can directly compare it to. It's like remaking a movie.
Sure.
And you watch, like, is Gus Van Sant's Psycho not that bad? You're like, well, it's fine. But like the Hitchcock Psycho is pretty good. So it's kind of a little tough.
Yeah, you can do a shot-for-shot remake without adding any flavor of like one of the best movies ever made. Okay.
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah. Patrick Bateman, Jesus Christ, Norman Bateman was so scary. Like, who would be great at that? Norman Bates. Thank you very much. Vince Vaughn. You're like, okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought they did a great episode. It's a great episode. I think they achieved what they needed to achieve. The psychopathy, like you're talking about with Ellie, and a really scary thing of like, I did also like a religious cult is immediately like, so cannibalism? I don't know. We're out of options. And like down the street, there is a commune of communists that are running electricity.
Yes, exactly. It's, that's the thing about that episode is it felt very ham-handed. And, I haven't played The Last of Us Part 1 in a while, but I remember the reveal of the leader's evil nature being a lot more significant and unexpected. Whereas like from the moment you see him, you're like, that's not a good dude. I don't like this dude in the TV show. So I like the reveal a little bit more in the game.
I think I remember the reveal of the in the video game of being much more like a cape turn, like, and you're like, whereas this one, it's just a slow descent into like, oh, this guy's an asshole. Yeah. God, he's a child predator too. Like, oh God,
Jesus.
I know. And also they dropped, this is not part of the video game, but they do drop that he used to be a school teacher and you're like,
that's true. Oh, I didn't even think about that. That sucks.
Yeah.
That sucks. So my number 3 then is going to be episode 9, the one we just talked about. Look for the Light. I thought it was handled really well.
Interesting.
Yeah, I thought it was a great kind of bullet to the entire season. It didn't, maybe the impact is less on me because I knew what was going to happen, but it was a very faithful adaptation of that. It may have peaked a little bit higher if I didn't know what was going to happen, but I thought they handled it really well.
Well, okay, continuing the trend. I think this is where the 2 and 1 is going to be the interesting one because I have the exact same one. I have the finale here. Really good. I don't know. Really hard to explain. Just like the episode with that we were just talking about with the cult and the cannibalism and things like that. Is that you have the story beats you got to hit and you hit them and it's really good and really impactful. Fuck. Okay. Well, then good job by you. Like and also I think some little artistic turns they took in this one. I think the nice quiet nature of Joel killing everyone. Like, I don't think like huge, loud bullets and all this kind of stuff. No, just a quiet, it's cold and calculating. He's getting Ellie back. I think that was a really great choice.
Also, it happening in the daytime. I'm pretty sure that in the video game, it's night and there's flashing lights and it's like much more chaotic. This is much more like, to do it in the cold light of day is a lot creepier, I think.
I would agree with you. I think that was a great choice too. Yeah.
So we've got now for our number 2 and number 1. Why don't you just tell us, Andrew, your number 1? Where did it place?
Number 1. My first, the best episode of the season.
Go for the number 1 because we're there now. This is like Survivor. Now that there's 2 left, we announce the winner, not the loser.
We vote for who to win. Yes. Not to eliminate. It's the Bill and Frank episode. Yeah. I think it's kind of hard to, it's so odd because it is the least to do with the story, with the main canon of what propels the story forward. Sure. Our main characters are not really in this episode. They're in the episode at the end. And to do a bottle episode, which I think is kind of a cheap term for television, which usually means they're contained in one place, but essentially this is a bottle episode, and to have characters that you'll only see once, for sure, this is where it gets all its flowers. Like, this is where it deserves all the credit in the world. You introduced 2 new characters for us that we have no feelings towards whatsoever, and then we know we'll never see again. And yet, Bill and Frank will be the impact of why you remember all the decisions you make. It will propel 2 people that Ellie's never even going to meet. Mm-hmm. And you know the decisions that they make going forward will be with those people in the back of the viewer's head. Yeah. Oh, I just think it's just such a success from top to bottom and just could not have been achieved better with 2 great actors. Just amazing stuff.
Yeah, one of the best episodes of TV I've ever seen in my life. And I think it does more for the overall story than any other episode. I'm kind of the opposite camp. I think that Joel and Ellie deciding to endure and survive is informed greatly by the fact that these 2 lived the best version of their lives in a post-apocalyptic world. Just by enduring and surviving. That's it. They decided to hunker down and just enjoy life for what it was. And that informs the choice that Joel and Ellie make to say maybe they can find happiness as a father and daughter and just continue to live their lives. Just an unbelievable episode. Not to take anything away from the first episode, which I think is your number 2 as well.
Number 2. Yeah, it's amazing.
Fantastic. And that was the proof of concept to me that I needed. It did enough, following closely to the storyline. Also changed enough to make me think that maybe a couple things can deter a little bit. Strangely, not strangely, completely predictably, the lowest rated episode on IMDb, Left Behind, 7.4.
Oh, wow.
Curiously, the second lowest ranked episode on this of this season is episode 3, Long Time with Bill and Frank. Whatever. I wonder why. I wonder what it has to do with.
I wonder, it's like almost like a groundswell movement where everyone got together and decided on something. It's gross. People suck. Yeah. This is why democracy doesn't work. And then my mic gets cut. We can't let people vote. It really is beautiful. And the amount, even just rereading those episodes and thinking about what happens in each one, it really just sells the point too that like every episode is wildly different than the next one. And that is so cool. And yet they were able to keep this thing on the tracks of like moving forward, knowing that we got to get Ellie to this place. We need to get Ellie and it kept going. It's just really incredible. It is really incredible. And I know we talked about possibly doing a little bit of our predictions for the upcoming seasons, but we're actually going to keep that to our Patreon. We're going to have an episode that we're putting up with all of our thoughts on what's going to come in the next season or 2. That way we can completely separate any spoilers out. We'll give a big warning of don't listen to this unless you've played the games, because now look, everyone who's played the games is walking around knowing that there's just still so much more of the story to tell. It's such an exciting time to be a fan of this game. Yeah, Mikey and I talked about it. I completely agree. I think these are 2 contained things. I think we should talk about season 1 and how great it was and compare it to the video game and do everything like that as a contained thing. And then we should do something for season 2 as a whole, because that is a whole new can of bananas. Like it's a lot, man. Like it's
a can of bananas.
How do you eat your bananas?
I usually just eat them peel and all. Here's what I do. I unpeel them.
Interesting.
I throw out that disgusting bit in the middle, huck that in the trash, right. And then I just eat the delicious outside, the bitter rinds.
Oh, it's so chewy and wonderful. It just sharpens my teeth. Nothing, by the way, in Back to the Future 1 at the end, when the Doc comes back and he has a garbage compactor that helps him now propel the the DeLorean, no garbage has ever looked better in my life than he roots through the garbage to find like, we need some stuff. And it's like sitting on the top of like coffee grounds and a banana peel. And it's like, hey, look at that. What a Pepsi can or something like that. Like it's so perfect. Sorry.
Unreal.
Yeah, so that's our thoughts on Last of Us. You know, obviously we have so much more to talk about, and obviously we're going to continue that over on Patreon. So please join us there. But if you have thoughts about this, please talk to us about it at Retrograde Mikey, at Retrograde Andy, at Retrograde Pod on Twitter, on Instagram, email. Oh my God, so many ways to get a hold of us because I don't want to stop talking about this fucking TV show, and we probably have another year before it comes out. So
100%. Can't wait for the next season. But until then, would you recommend people play the game if they've just like maybe this is their introduction to games, or do they start with The Last of Us Part 2?
I would recommend playing the game. You have enough time now. I would play both games. This is the Game of Thrones thing we're talking about. Like people liked the end of season 2 and they're like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm going to read all the books because we got 2 years in between seasons. Do it. You have time now and they're fully accessible. They're so cheap right now. They're on Game Pass or whatever version you want to use. And you can go back and play. The episode ended. That's why I told you earlier. And I went to my player 1. I'm like, we have to play number 2.
Yes.
We have to talk about this.
Yeah. So 100%. It could be your introduction to an entirely new medium. Who knows?
Yes, it could be, and it's nice and handholdy because you already know all your friends are there.
Well, that was fun, Andrew. I love it. And I can't wait to do the same thing for season 2.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for listening. We love every single one of you, and we can't wait to talk to you soon. My name is Andrew Baskman. With me, as always, is the bad man of podcasting, Mr. B Mop himself,
Mikey Aaronworth.
This is the Retrograde Podcast.
Game over.
Do a clicker sound for the final time. Oh, that's so scary. Isn't that scary?
Furnished by Sad Styles Productions.
I'm a scary boy. Man, I'm a scary man.